Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game pod from the Timberwolves win over the Dallas Mavericks on Christmas Day, snapping a 3-game losing streak. We'll talk about how the Wolves built a 28-point lead and how they gave almost all of it back, but still held on to win at the end. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic Christmas. And the Wolves' losing streak is over. They lost 3 in a row, and it's now snapped after an impressive win over Dallas, albeit a Mavs team with no Luka in the second half, albeit a 28-point lead that the Wolves built, which was impressive, and we'll definitely start with that today. But then also a 28-point lead that they gave all of it, but I think 3 points back before holding on to win by 6 at the end. So a lot to get to here today. And Wolves are back in action again tomorrow night against Houston. So lots to cover. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder, you can also subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com and get everything you need for Wolves coverage, notes from this podcast, some national articles, some links to other Wolves content daily at LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe there. You'll see that newsletter in your inbox. All right, let's go ahead and dive in on this game. This was an important game, as it feels like they all are right now for the Wolves, just because of the hole they've dug themselves so far this season. But, setting this up, they'd lost 3 in a row in pretty disappointing fashion going back to, remember, they'd won 6 out of 7. They get completely blown out by Cat and the Knicks last Thursday. They lose in disappointing fashion, familiar fashion against the Warriors, coming out flat, coming back, but then still losing by double digits Saturday against the Warriors, and then similar situation against the Hawks on Monday. National TV, the Western Conference Finals rematch narrative, Christmas Day, the whole thing, and the Wolves needed to come out strong against the Mavericks, and they did. They played well in the first quarter, and then pulled way ahead in the second quarter, building most of what eventually became a 28-point lead prior to halftime. And it was just before halftime that Luka Doncic got hurt. He strained his calf, is what the Mavs reported, and quickly ruled him out for the rest of the game, which is obviously could be a very dicey injury. Remember Cat's injury that he missed 50-plus games with 3 years ago, I guess now. 2 years ago was a calf strain. And, of course, sometimes calf strains could be a much more serious and not a calf strain injury at all. So, hopefully things turn out fine for Luka, at least in the near term. Or I should say, hopefully that we find out soon that it's a shorter-term injury, of course, for the sake of Luka and the Mavs in basketball. In this game, the Wolves had built most of what was ultimately a 17-point halftime lead. It ballooned to 28 points in the third quarter. And how did they do it? Well, they played exactly how they want to play and how they've needed to play all season long, which is offensively, ball movement, drive and kick, rotate the ball around the perimeter. Like it's not rocket science. They're still not running a whole lot of set plays, but they're just moving the basketball. It really is that simple. And I wish I had some sort of magic bullet type analysis for you here, but it's literally ball movement. And it's exactly why a player like Julius Randle at times can completely muck that up. He can clog the movement because of his propensity to isolate. And as we saw late in this game, Ant was very guilty of that. And we'll get into that later. But the ball was snapping around the perimeter. They were pushing pace, but not ultimately getting quick shots. Remember, this is a Wolves team that they don't want to play to break that pace. They'd rather play with their own set defense. They'd rather have a half court, be able to set up their defense in the half court and play at a slower pace, have less possessions, less variance, right? Especially, against inferior teams, which wasn't obviously the case against Dallas. Dallas wants to push the pace. What the Wolves did in this game was they pushed it, but they didn't force buckets in transition when it wasn't there simply to do it. They would pull the ball out, have some sort of a, almost a secondary break type set. The ball would snap around the perimeter and they'd pass up multiple, semi-open threes for an open three, or a pump fake, attack the closeout, get to the bucket and score, or get to the bucket and throw a lob up to Rudy because the defense is still in rotation. And how often did we see that happen? Rudy ended up with 7 shot attempts in this game. Only 2 of them were in the second half, and none of them were in the fourth quarter. We'll talk more about that too. He had 5 shot attempts in the first half. And I would be willing to guess at least 3 or 4 of them were because the ball had rotated around the perimeter. Somebody pump faked a 3, attacked a closeout. And because the defense was still in rotation, somebody had to leave Rudy or tried to play 2, and Nikhil or Conley or whoever could float it up to Rudy as a lob. And Rudy could catch and dunk, or he could catch and come down with it, pump fake, go up, get the foul, whatever. That is all because of the ball moving on the perimeter. And all you need is one guy to put somebody on skates, beat his man, and then that lob's open. They can get all the way to the cup, or you can kick it to the opposite side of the floor with the defense in rotation and get a corner 3. It's so mind-numbingly simple. And yet the Wolves have struggled to do it so often this year. And people clamor for Chris Finch and more structure in the offense, or complain about Chris Finch and clamor for more structure in the offense. And in some cases, that's true. Like, there wasn't that much structure in this game either. But this is exactly why there doesn't need to be. The second half is why there should be more of it. And we'll talk about that. In the first half, we still saw, they're still running ATOs. It's not like Chris Finch isn't drawing up plays in timeouts, which would, of course, be coaching malpractice. But, like, I don't know, Josh Minott comes in the game and they draw up a play after a timeout for him to get a corner 3. It rims out, doesn't make it. That's the problem right now, is when they call plays, when they actually run sets, they're just missing open shots. That happens sometimes. Teams go through these things. Now, it's the set plays that can help get you out of them because you're generating these open shots. It could pull you out of the stagnant offense like we saw in the second half because the coach says, hey, we're running this play. We're not playing Ant or Julius ISO ball for 20 seconds of this possession. That's where the structure needs to come in. But the first half is exactly why you shouldn't need to have a crazy structure when you've got this personnel grouping as a team. I mean, there aren't that many NBA teams that are running. This isn't Flip Saunders offense, right? You don't need to run a play every time down the floor. The first half was a great example of how the Wolves can function offensively without running set plays constantly. We saw Dante DiVincenzo have a really strong first half. Dante was 3 of 7 shooting threes in the game. I believe all those makes were in the first half. Nikhil was 2 of 4. Julius Randle was 3 for 5. And actually, at least a couple of those came out of ball rotation in the offense. They weren't just him isolating. I mean, he rarely isolates outside the arc, right? If he does, he puts the ball on the deck and he's backing somebody down to the free throw line. Like, that's Julius's game. His 3-pointers are almost entirely catch and shoot. And that's a good thing. That's the good version of Julius. If he's taking threes within the flow of the offense, the dude turns into 23, 10, and 8. This was a good Julius Randle game. Because the threes he took were in the flow of the offense. He had a couple of rocky possessions, but Ant does every game too. That's just part of it when you're playing with an isolation scorer who's so talented and can be efficient. That's fine. The problem was in the second half, it got stagnant. In the first half, they build this 28-point lead, or I should say they're up 17 at halftime. Luka goes out just before halftime. The lead expands early third quarter, and the ball movement continues. The activity level continues. Like, Naz Reid didn't have I think he was the only player in the team that had a negative plus minus. He only had 6 points on 6 shots, but he was active. He had a couple of tough shots when the Wolves were building this lead in the third quarter. Naz is a good example of that. Josh Minott only played 5 first half minutes, didn't get in at the end of the third. He was at the scorers table, but there wasn't a stoppage. He didn't get in. Minott had a strong first half stint. He had a couple of threes rim out, but he played well. And the activity level was there. He was third on the team in plus minus with a +6 in 5 minutes. Minott was a big part of that initial run. Dante, I already called him out. Nikhil. Really everybody that saw the floor for the Wolves played well in this game. And the activity level is the biggest thing from this one. I want to get into what happened as the lead slipped away. I want to talk a bit about Ant's play in the second half, and then ultimately how the Wolves pulled out of this thing. or pulled out of their tailspin and pulled out this game and ended up with the win. And we'll hit studs and duds here toward the end of the show. That's what we got coming up here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Game Time. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Use Game Time Picks. They'll help you curate your selection to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Really any sort of live entertainment. You can get your tickets over at Game Time, and please use Game Time Picks. They're all in pricing feature. You can toggle it on to show you your total up front so that way there's no surprise fees at checkout. You can also get a panoramic view for your seat in the app before you buy, and they have a lowest price guarantee. That means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends over at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to a lot of people I know. It's easy to have a few subscriptions you don't even realize you're paying for. Rocket Money makes it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. One of the best features they have is a subscription tracker. I know people that have used it to cancel services that you just don't use anymore, and they've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for your future with no stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, so the Timberwolves built this lead that ballooned to 28 points in the second half, and it was they played exactly how they needed to play. I didn't even talk about the defense. I mentioned earlier how Rudy was getting more shot attempts because of the ball movement and the flow of the offense, and I should clarify, I'm not advocating that the Wolves are like running sets to get the ball to Rudy. I'm not advocating for them to throw him more lobs and pick and roll necessarily, although it maybe makes sense depending on how the defense is playing it. My point is the more the ball moves, the more it will naturally find Rudy Gobert, because that means there's motion toward the paint. There's motion toward the rim. You've got guys that are driving. You've got guys that are leaving Rudy because Ant with a full head of steam or Conley's floater or whatever, teams are worried about this stuff coming toward the rim, and they leave Rudy, and that leaves you with what should be an easy lob, maybe a drop-off pass to Rudy at the rim. So naturally, he's going to get more shot attempts if the offense is flowing. It's different than saying they should force the ball to Rudy in post-ups. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But if the offense has more flow, the ball finds Rudy. If the ball finds Rudy, it's pretty obvious the dude plays that much harder on defense. And I'm not ripping on Rudy Gobert. That's natural, right? If you see the ball in one end of the floor, it makes you more willing, even if subconsciously, to be more active and to be in it on the defensive end of the floor. It's the old, feed the ball to the big man in transition if he gets the block or whatever, that all the old big men will talk about, right? All the old heads will say that stuff. It's 100% true. If the ball finds Rudy offensively and he's engaged and active on that end of the floor, he's going to play that much harder defensively. And when Rudy plays hard defensively, this team goes to a whole other level. And that's exactly what we saw in this game. The Wolves, by the way, held the Mavs under 100 points. I know no Luka in the second half. They also gave up a ton of second half points, but the Mavs only had 40 points at halftime. The Wolves' activity level, again, like that's the phrase. Those are the two words to describe this game, is activity level. Because defensively, they were clogging passing lanes. They were clogging driving lanes. They were Xing out on the perimeter. They were contesting threes. They held Dallas to 16 made threes in this game, which isn't like a crazy low number. It's actually more than the Wolves hit. But it was the combination of that, and they didn't really foul a whole lot in this game. The officials let a lot of stuff go, and the paint defense also was really, really strong. I thought early, Jaden did a good job on Luka. He did have 14 points on 9 shots in the first half, but he had to work for everything. There were a couple of really tough shots that he had to take. He always, kind of does that to himself a little bit. He also had 3 turnovers in 60 minutes. I know Kyrie had 39 and hit some crazy shots, but that's going to happen. It's not like Kyrie had a bunch of open shots. They certainly defended him worse at times in the Western Conference Finals last year. It was more about sometimes Luka and Kyrie are going to make these shots, but we have to force them to make tough shots. And sometimes they do, and you tip your cap. Clay had 12 points, took him 12 shots to do it. He was only 4 of 10. Well, I say only 4 of 10 is fine on threes, but 12 points on 12 shots, the Wolves will take that. And one of the things I mentioned when previewing this matchup on, I guess it was Tuesday's show, was they have a few guys that could be third scorers. It just depends on who steps up on any given night. Well, nobody else hit their scoring average, right? Like Clay, and we talked about Najee Marshall, and we talked about a handful of these guys, PJ Washington, that are right around, the 12, 13, 14, 15 points per game that can be their third scorer. Well, Luka didn't play in the second half, so he only scored 14. Kyrie had 39 to make up for what Luka didn't score because of the injury. Nobody else scored more than 12. Clay had 12. Quentin Grimes had 10 off the bench. PJ Washington only had 7. He hit 1 3 that the Wolves had a poor closeout onto the left corner, which brought back terrible nightmares the Western Conference Finals last year. PJ Washington was held in check. Lively only had 6 points, although he was great in the paint as always. Najee Marshall only had 4 points in 14 minutes. The ancillary players did not bring anything to the table for Dallas, and that's in part a credit to the Wolves trying to force Kyrie and Luka to make tough shots, and also their defensive rotations being crisp. And again, I come back to activity level. It's that simple. It really is. And Kyrie made some tough shots. They're going to do that. Now, when the Wolves got up 28, you could see them, and specifically Ant, basically just hit, pull the reins, right? It looked like somebody riding a horse that says, whoa, pull the reins, slow down. That's what happened to the Wolves offense in a bad way. Ant, there were a couple times when they had this lead that was still over 20 points where you could see him just put the brakes on when he crossed the timeline. Completely slow things down and be like, all right, we're up 20 plus. I can isolate here and see if I can make a crazy shot. They made a couple of them, and they had a couple decent possessions mixed in. There were a couple made shots, not because they were decent possessions, but where they came away with something. But it allowed the Mavericks to claw back into the game. The ball simply stopped moving. And again, I wish that there was some other analysis that I could give you about this, but that's what happened. And it was mostly Ant. It wasn't Julius Randle in this game. It was Anthony Edwards who just was like, and I'm going to do this Christmas Day takeover thing. I'm going to see how many I can score. I'm going to go toe-to-toe with Kyrie. And yeah, he could do that, and he can make some shots, and he eventually hit the game ceiling shot. He hit a couple of tough shots along the way, but he made things so much more difficult for the Wolves. And this is where I think the criticism is valid that Chris Finch isn't able to pull the Wolves out of this sort of a tailspin. And obviously he can't. It's got to be up to the players. But why aren't there more sets being called? When Ant leaves the floor for a rest at the start of the fourth quarter, why can't they be running something to get, a pin down to get Naz an open 3, and a pin down to get Dante an open 3, or some sort of action where Naz gets the ball and can rip it and go to the basket? Those are your other, your Naz's, your Dante's. If Julius is on the floor and Ant's not, it's Randle. Run a few more actual actions to get some guys the ball in advantageous positions instead of simply allowing an isolation ball, allowing the offense to stagnate, and then put yourself in a position where you're back on you're on your heels. You're running in place a little bit offensively. Well, Dallas is hitting tough shot after tough shot, and some of them, frankly, weren't even that tough, because as soon as you pull the reins offensively and you slow down and you don't force the issue a little bit, and the other team knows, hey, look, they're not passing the ball. They're just going to dribble the air out of it, waste 20 seconds to jack up a tough, attempt at a bank shot from 18 feet on the wing. Then your activity level plummets defensively as well. The want to plummets defensively. And you think it's human nature, right? And this is why this happens all the time in the NBA. It's not necessarily unique to the Wolves, but it's frustrating because we've seen this so often this year. Either this is how they get down by a lot or it's how they give up leads. It's the stagnant offense that leads to lackadaisical defense. Human nature is, hey, I'm up 20 plus. I could give up a shot here. Tip my cat to them if they make the open three, whatever. Like, they're going to make the open three. It's the NBA. You're not playing the Hornets, right? Like, the Wolves really messed that up. And again, I'll go back to what I said in the first segment. I'm not saying the Wolves, the pace itself needs to increase. I'm not saying it's a, track meet, but the urgency level has to be there. The ball movement has to be there. The drive and kick, the swing the ball around the perimeter, the multiple passes per possession versus I bet if we looked at passes per possession, and I bet there were a ton of possessions with 3 or less passes per possession that ended in no bucket for the Wolves, no points for the Wolves in the second half of this game. And I bet if you look at the first half, all these possessions had 5, 6, 7 plus passes that led to points or at least an open shot opportunity for the Wolves. It really is that simple. It's basketball 101. And obviously the incredible play of Ant, incredible talent of Ant. He hits that tough shot running to his left that, yes, should have been a foul. He was lucky he didn't get called for a technical, but he got hit across the wrist as he attempted it. The Ant still doesn't get enough foul calls, but I'll go back to he doesn't help himself with the way he complains about stuff. He had 0 free throw attempts in this game, by the way. Anthony Edwards shot 17 2-point shots in this game, and he went to the rim more than he normally does, more than he has for most of the season. 17 twos and only 7 threes, 0 free throw attempts, which is shocking. I didn't think it was like egregiously bad that he wasn't getting any calls, but like that one, he got hit across the wrist. And then you see on the other end, Kyrie gets 6 free throw attempts on 13 2-point shots, 16 free throw, or they each had Kyrie shot 27 attempts in the game, had 6 free throw attempts, and had 24 overall attempts. But more 2-point shots. He had 14 2-point shots. Kyrie only had 13. And Ant doesn't get to the line, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, great shot making at the end by Ant. The Wolves did enough to win. They held on. They won by 6. And we have to give credit where credit's due there. No, they should have let the Mavs back into the game. But this became a close, late, clutch time situation that the Wolves came out victorious. And it was because of the tough Ant shot making. So there is a time and a place for it. And sometimes it is the end of the game. And sometimes you got to take someone off the dribble. You got to flatten out and isolate, and your superstar's got to be a superstar. And he did that at the end. The time to do that is not when you're up 20 plus, and you got there by playing team basketball offensively and creating a level of urgency that you carry over to the defensive end of the floor. You can't just not do that stuff then. So all that to say, good for the Wolves to hang on at the end as well. We'll do studs and duds here next. Couple notes on the rotation. That's how we'll close today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right. Let's close with studs and duds. We talked a bit about Julius Randle off the top. Julius played great. 23 points on 13 shots, 3 of 5 on threes, 8 of 10 at the line, 10 boards, 8 assists, 3 turnovers, and me and everybody else have been on his case for the last week plus for his, everything, really. Defensive effort, demeanor, shot selection, isolation opportunities just being seemingly ramped up. This was a good game from Julius Randle. It really was. And I still think his best moments can come when Ant's on the bench and the offense can revolve around Julius Randle. And I think the Wolves should do that more often. I think they should find a way. And I had clamored on the show the other day for them to start Naz and bring Randle off the bench and give some minutes to Josh Minot. Well, Minot got 5 rotation minutes, which is a start. Naz only played 22 minutes, and Randle was good. He played 34, which, by the way, was 4th on the team. So, like, Jaden and Rudy and Ant all played more than him. So, I think a little bit of progress there, and he also played better. So, even if he's going to keep starting, staggering the minutes with Ant, so he gets moments where he's on the floor without Ant, and the offense can revolve around Julius Randle. I think that makes a lot of sense. For him to have 8 assists and only 3 turnovers was really good to see. I thought this was a very good Julius Randle game. Credit where credit is due. I'd love to see him play more games like this. The Wolves will be in a much better place as a team if he can. Rudy, awesome in this game. 14 and 10. Another player who's really struggled lately, who came through in this one. 6 of 7 shooting, made both of his free throw attempts, 14 points, 10 rebounds, a couple of blocks, a steal, only 1 turnover, tied for the team lead in plus minus. Rudy played a really strong game. He controlled the paint. This was a matchup that gave him some fits last year in the playoffs. And Derek Lively was fine, but Rudy outplayed him. Rudy out-physicaled him. He out-physicaled Daniel Gafford, who wanted to try and be a bully, and Jay Billis was talking about how nobody wants to play Gafford. Well, the dude put up zeros. Daniel Gafford had no points on 2 shots, 0 rebounds in 13 minutes, only 1 block. Was a -9. So Daniel Gafford, big tough guy. Nobody wants to play him, but he didn't do anything in this game. Rudy was great. 14 and 10, 2 blocks. Really good game for Rudy Gobert. My third stud in this one, I don't know. I mean, Ant hit the big shot. The line looks fine, but I blame him for giving that lead back, even though he came up big at the end. I'd go Dante. Or you could go Nikhil. Nikhil actually only played 15 minutes, and I thought I'll get to the rotation miss here in a second. But Dante was great in the first half. He was a big reason for building this lead. 11 points at 4 of 10. He missed some shots in the second half that brought that percentage down, but 3 of 7 on threes, 3 rebounds, an assist, only 1 turnover. I thought he was really instrumental in the first half in building the lead that was 17 points at halftime, knocking down open shots, pushing the pace. This was a really strong Dante DiVincenzo game. And the hope is that this kind of can be the impetus for the only legitimate good stretch, besides the preseason, right? The only good stretch of play for Dante. Hopefully this is the start of it and he could build on it. And this can snowball in a good way into a string of strong performances for Dante, and his season could get back on track, or not back on track, could get on track in a Wolves uniform. Nikhil only played 15 minutes. I think that down the stretch, he should have been on the floor instead of Jaden McDaniels. I don't think that the defensive drop-off is significant enough between McDaniels and Alexander Walker. And depending on the matchup, I would say there isn't a drop-off, and Alexander Walker is every bit as good defensively. I understand Jaden's bigger, great. And he did actually rebound a little bit in this game. He had 6 boards in 35 minutes, which is nice to see. But Nikhil actually rebounded at the same rate, 3 rebounds in just 15 minutes. But for him to play the only 15 minutes is tough, especially when the offense was struggling down the stretch. The catch and shoot from Nikhil's far more dangerous than for Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels did hit a corner 3 in the second half, which was huge. But Nikhil's just a better shooter and more of a threat offensively. I think he even scares teams more when he puts the ball on the floor than when Jaden does, because he's a better passer than Jaden. Jaden was fine in this game, but I just think Nikhil Alexander-Walker should get those shots down the stretch when they're searching offensively. And I also like what he does against Kyrie every bit as much as I like what Jaden does. Honestly, I think that was a bit of a miss. Josh Minot playing 5 rotation minutes is great. And I don't know. I can't tell you with a straight face who should lose minutes for Josh Minot. Grand scheme, I think it's Julius Randle. In this game, I understand why it wasn't, because Julius played well. But the more Minot plays, the better. That's the camp I'm in now. I don't know how to say it. The more Josh Minot plays, the better. The activity level, the size, all the things I've talked about for 2+ years on the show. Josh Minot needs to play more. He is an NBA rotation player, and I don't care that there isn't one discernible thing that he's going to make threes. Oh, he's a lockdown defender. No, I don't know, but he's good. He's well-rounded. He can do all of these things, and it's the activity level and the size and the athleticism that you can't teach, the want to. On top of all these things he can do. It's what's he going to do on any given night? Can he knock down open 3? Maybe. Is he going to dunk on someone? Maybe. He's going to run in transition. He's going to block at least 1 shot if he sees the floor. He had a really impressive block in this game. He's just got to play more. I don't care how it happens. He's just got to play more. I don't know how else to put that. but he's got to see the floor more often. All right. Wolves play the Rockets tomorrow night. We are going to do a preview on Friday's show, preview of the Wolves-Rockets matchup. Haven't seen the Rockets here in a couple of weeks. That was that overtime loss in the midst of that tough stretch for Minnesota. It was a fun game. So we'll preview Wolves-Rockets. We'll hit a couple probably rotation lineup type things on Friday's show as well. We'll get you ready for that game. And, of course, the live postcast following Wolves-Rockets as well with Luke and Jack. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder to subscribe to the Locked On Wolves newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com, your one-stop shop for all things Wolves. Some national articles, some great content, links to other Wolves content. Make sure to subscribe at LockedOnDaily.com. The Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.